So welcome back. I'm Cathy.
And I'm Rose.
And today we're going to continue with our Christmas treats, our edible gifts. But we wanted to give a quick tip before we start with that. Last week when we were working with chocolate in the kids section, we had pans of chocolate left, both white and dark, that we hadn't done anything with. And just wanted to let you know that this can be reused. So a good thing to do once you have melted chocolate is spread it on a piece of parchment paper on a pan and just let it dry. This can then be broken up in chunks, put in a Ziploc bag. You can put it in your cupboard and store it. And then when you want to make something else that has chocolate in it, for example, maybe it's a chocolate chunk cookie, then you can just cut it up and put it in there, or you can remelt it. It may develop a little bit of a film on it. Chocolate chips sometimes do that. And it looks kind of like a white powdery film, but it's still edible and still usable. That is actually called bloom, and it's just the cocoa butter that's rising to the surface of the chocolate. So don't throw it out, just keep using it.
Yeah, and that's actually because we didn't temper it. So that's, if you had tempered it, you wouldn't get as much of that bloom. But because we didn't do that cooling and reheating process to the specific temperatures, that's why you're getting that right. Not dangerous, still edible, still delicious.
Which also means you don't have to eat all that chocolate that's left over, which is probably a good idea.
Yeah, if it were me, I probably would have just kept dipping things in it and eating it.
Okay. So we did mostly before cooking type things when we did the infusions. And even when we did the kids' recipes, it wasn't real complicated. And today's not going to be complicated either, but it is a little bit more of baking. And baking has to be a little bit more exact because a lot of it is a chemical reaction with ingredients. So we're going to share with you 4 recipes today. A white chocolate huckleberry scone is what we're going to make first.
Mm-hmm. Then we're going to make some peanut butter blossom cookies,
which are also a gluten-free cookie, by the way. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to make some homemade granola.
And we're going to finish off with a salted caramel sauce, which can top anything from your favorite ice cream to apples to you name it.
Okay.
All right.
So first we'll get started on the scones. This is one of my favorite recipes, and it was actually given to me by a good friend of mine. She was a home economics teacher in Missoula and also in Oregon. And they freeze well, so you can make them ahead of time and put them in the freezer if you want, or wrap them and give them as gifts. So the recipe calls for 2 cups of flour. I sometimes use regular all-purpose flour in this recipe. I sometimes use an almond flour if I'm making them gluten-free. And today what I'm using is a whole wheat pastry flour. Now, the difference between those flours, the whole wheat pastry flour and the all-purpose flour, is that pastry flour is a little bit softer wheat, and it also has less of a gluten content to it. So it makes a little bit more delicate type pastry as compared to the all-purpose. It also is a whole wheat product, and so nutritionally it's better for you. It contains the bran, the endosperm, and the germ of the wheat instead of just the endosperm that you get in a processed white flour.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never cooked with this. I'll have to try it.
I like the whole wheat pastry flour because sometimes if you use a regular whole wheat flour, it can make products really heavy, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are kind of turned off by that. But I doubt you'll notice any difference using the whole wheat pastry flour. So I have 2 cups of whole wheat pastry flour in my bowl. And to that, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sugar, a tablespoon of baking powder, and this is a quick bread, classified as a quick bread, so it's leavened with baking powder or baking soda as compared to yeast. And then 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So ingredients are pretty simple. Okay. Now comes the ingredients that add the fat to the recipe. I'll stir those dry ingredients together. And typical with a quick bread recipe, Rosie, would you get me the butter in the refrigerator, please? You have to keep that cold because we're going to use a technique called cutting in. And whenever you see cutting in a recipe, what you want is you want to grab this tool. It's called a pastry blender. It helps cut these cubes of butter, and this happens to be 5 tablespoons of butter, but I just cut it into smaller pieces. It helps incorporate those into our dry ingredients. You can use, if you don't have one of these at home, you can use 2 knives in an opposing fashion, like that. That's perfectly okay, but this makes a little quicker work of it. Okay. So I'm going to put my cubes of butter in there. And then with my pastry blender, I'm just going to work it back and forth and make those butter particles smaller and coated with the dry ingredients. So usually with quick breads, there are pretty standard methods of mixing. This is actually called the biscuit method of mixing. So if you've made baking powder biscuits before, perchance, then you've probably used this method. This is also used for pie crust.
Yeah, I was going to ask, pie crust.
Mm-hmm.
Do you put the butter in cold so that once it goes in the oven, doesn't all leak out? It stays kind of...
Well, if this has that, yeah, that's probably part of the reason. But the other part is it tends to make a more tender product if you have kind of little chunks of butter in there, as opposed to a melted butter mixed all the way in like a cookie. Yeah.
Kind of flakier.
Kind of flakier.
It creates those little pockets.
Yeah, great. Yep. And you'll see there's not nearly as many butter chunks kind of on my pastry blender this time. And my butter chunks are much smaller. Okay. Once I get those cut in, I don't want to use this tool anymore because I'm just going to keep cutting my batter into smaller and smaller pieces. So now I want to kind of incorporate my batter. So butter chunks, here's one.
It almost kind of looks like sand.
Yeah, kind of sandy. There's probably nothing bigger than the size of a green pea in here for butter chunks.
But it's definitely not all mushed in either. I can see the little butter chunks.
You can see those butter chunks in there. Okay. And now I'm going to incorporate cream. Now I have tried to make this recipe with just milk, and it works fine. The cream just gives it a richness in flavor. The amount of cream in the recipe is 7/8 of a cup, and that's not a very common measurement because we have on here a cup and 2/3 of a cup and 3/4 of a cup, but 7/8 of a cup is actually 1 cup minus 2 tablespoons.
Okay.
Okay. And that is going to make a little bit of difference how much cream you actually put in, depending on what kind of flour you use.
Okay.
Because different flours absorb it differently. Yeah.
And you just put half of that in to start?
Yeah, I'm going to put half of it in to start. More than likely, I'll need all of it. But you can see the mixture is starting to kind of pull together. And sometimes, it's kind of like pie crust. Sometimes if it's a really dry time in the winter when you're making it, you need a little bit more water. So the characteristic that we're looking for is that our dough holds together.
Okay.
If you want to cut down on the fat in this recipe, half and half works okay. But I'm a firm believer there are no bad foods. So cream is okay. You just don't want to have cream every day. Right?
It's one of my staple ingredients in my fridge.
Is it? What do you use it for?
Ooh, I like to make like a cream sauce for pasta, like a veggie cream sauce with it.
Right.
I always like to make some chocolate ganache.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like having cream around is a good thing.
Right.
Sometimes just whipping cream for the tops of waffles or something.
Right.
I always make the mistake of thinking I can hand whip my cream.
Oh, yeah.
And then I get about, 5 minutes in and I think I should have done this in the KitchenAid.
It is. You know what works really well for hand whipping cream is a copper bowl.
Yeah, I cheat. I even put like an ice pack under my metal bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But I still get a while in and your arm gets tired.
There's some kind of a reaction with copper that makes the cream stabilize.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to feel this now and see if I want to add even a little bit more. It's not feeling too bad. So at this point, I'm going to incorporate my flavor for my scones. And this can be, you can tailor it to who you're making them for, your own taste buds. These are going to be white chocolate huckleberry again, and I know we've had this huckleberry theme.
We are in Montana. It's a good theme.
It is a good theme. But I have made ginger poppy seed scones using candied ginger and just cut up really fine. I would put the poppy seeds in with your dry ingredients.
Okay, not just on the top.
Not just on the top. Yeah, so they just kind of mix in a little bit. You can also make a cranberry scone, a chocolate hazelnut scone. So kind of the sky's the limit.
Yeah, those all sound delicious.
Yeah. And would you mind getting the huckleberries from the freezer? Mm-hmm. Thank you. My rule of thumb is, let me just wet this a tad bit more. When I am adding these ingredients for flavor, what I do is kind of approximate it so I have about 1 cup of flavor in there. So I might put some of these on the top. We're going to hold those back. And with my hands, I'm just going to kind of incorporate these gently. Okay. And then I bet I put the flour back in over there. I'm going to put a little bit on my countertop. And typically you'll see that recipes for scones call for a little flour on the countertop and then rolling it out into a circle and cutting it into pie shape. I like to do things differently. And I like to make a log with my scones.
I think a good tip if you have to roll things is that if you want it to be a circle, you should start with a little circular mound.
Right.
And if you want it to be a square, you should start with a square, because whatever you kind of start with is what your dough is going to tend to make in the end.
To migrate in that, yeah.
But this looks like you don't even need a
Well, this is a technique I think that I saw in maybe one of the Cook's Illustrated magazines.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to have it about 1 inch thick. It can be a little bit less. Did you know, by the way, our bodies have measuring capabilities? This is usually always 1 inch here. 3 inches for your finger, so you can kind of gauge it that way.
That's a good tip. So you're just looking at like your first knuckle.
And then I'm going to use my bench scraper to cut it. This will not mar the surface of, your countertop, but this is where I'm going to create my wedge shapes. Yeah.
So you're just cutting at an angle.
So I'm just cutting at an angle. Yep.
That's a good tip.
Put them on parchment paper, and they will expand in the oven because of our leavening agent.
Give them a little room.
So give them a little room. Yep. And then we're going to brush the top with a little cream.
Nice.
And sprinkle it with a little raw sugar.
Ooh, pretty. So that'll make it kind of brown and glossy.
Mm-hmm. This, by the way, is a great tool if you don't have a bench scraper, because I can not only use that to cut, but I can also use it to clean my surface. Okay, so a little brushing. And if you want to sprinkle it with some raw sugar, yeah. I would appreciate that.
If people don't have raw sugar, can they just use any sugar that they have in their cupboards?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And, if you were making maybe a chocolate hazelnut, maybe you would want to put on some cinnamon and sugar
Ooh, yeah,
on the top.
That would taste delicious.
So that can be also tailored to whatever your favorite ingredients are. If you want them to be a little bit shinier too, you could use an egg wash, which would just be
Even more
beaten
shiny.
egg, and it would add a little more shininess to it. Okay.
And then if they wanted to put all those extras on there, if they felt
Like, for example, that one looks a little bit,
it does look a little sad.
a little sad.
Didn't
Somebody's
quite-
going to say, I don't see any huckleberries in that one. So I'm just going to help it out
Yeah.
by putting some on the top. And sometimes, especially, if you work them into the batter, sometimes they don't always end up in a place where you can see them. Yeah.
No such thing as too many huckleberries.
That's right. We have to figure out ways to use our huckleberries. Our plethora of huckleberries.
You probably need like a savory way to get some huckleberries in your diet too, like some, I don't know, duck sauce or something.
Oh, yeah. That might work.
I don't know. The vegetarian suggesting
Duck sauce. And then we have a few chocolate chips left over, so we're just going to put those on the top too. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
And then pop these back in
Yeah,
the
that'd be
freezer.
great. Thank you. Thank you. So these will bake for about 25 minutes. Might be a little more, a little less, depending on what your oven is like. You can use fresh berries or dried cranberries as well. Just incorporate them the same way. And they bake at 375 degrees. So we'll pop those in.
Alrighty. So the next recipe we're going to share with you guys is a peanut butter blossom cookie. And this is one of the simplest things you could bake. It's also gluten-free. And there's lots of different kind of variations you could do on this. I like it because at Christmas times there's often like a cookie exchange and everybody brings a cookie and you need to bring something. And sometimes I don't have time to run to the store. It's so busy this season. So this is a recipe that doesn't take many ingredients. It has 3 ingredients and it's super easy to remember. It's one of the few recipes I know by heart. So you need a cup of peanut butter, a cup of sugar, and 1 egg. So it's really, really simple. And you just combine those 3 ingredients in a bowl. Okay. Maybe I should use this one, then you guys can see it better. got your cup of sugar, got your cup of peanut butter. I've never done it with chunky peanut butter, but I'm sure that you can do it with chunky peanut butter.
Oh, so you always use the creamy?
I always use the creamy, but
I usually use the chunky.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can use the chunky. Yep.
You could use if you have a peanut allergy too.
Almond
you certainly
butter,
could use
right?
almond butter,
yeah.
cashew butter, yes, sunflower butter.
Some sort of nut butter.
Mm-hmm. It would just take on that flavor, I think.
This is also a really good recipe that you can do with children. So if you have kids in the house that want to do some baking and you can work the oven for them, because it doesn't take very many ingredients, little kids can kind of get into having fun making it.
Yeah. So there's no leavening agent in that at all, like a regular recipe, right?
Yeah.
There's a garbage right there.
Oops.
Nope, it's locked.
All right. So you got your 3 ingredients in here. You stir it all up. Takes a little bit for the peanut butter to incorporate with the sugar. But this is a really good job for kids.
Mm-hmm. And there's no cooling time for the dough before you have to bake it. Right?
Yeah, like sugar cookies, you have to cool the dough often before you bake it. Not all of them, but many. I also like it because it doesn't make so much dough that you feel like, sometimes when I make cookies, I feel like I have to sit by the oven and do so many batches, you know?
Right.
And I don't quite have the patience for that sometimes. Alrighty. So once you kind of have your dough all incorporated, should look something like that, pretty smooth. And then we're just going to make some little balls of dough and put them on here. Do you want to help me with
Sure.
that?
I'd love to.
How big do we want to make them? That's kind of up to you. You can decide how big or small you would like your cookies to be. Sometimes I make them bigger and dip them in chocolate. Today we're going to make them blossom style with some Hershey's Kisses.
Do you ever use the teaspoon method when you get...
Yeah, I do sometimes.
Where you kind of get one glob and then scoop it off with the other spoon? So you want them to be probably about the size of looks like a walnut or golf ball, ping pong ball?
Yeah, they're a little smaller. And you can adjust your cooking time. If you make them a little bigger, you can just cook them a little bit longer.
So what characteristics are you going to look for doneness on these?
I like to peek at my cookies a lot and see. I really like a kind of underdone cookie. I like a gooey cookie. So I would just check them probably even just 4 minutes in. They cook for 8, but I would start checking them at 4.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Do you see? I'm noticing a difference in how we put cookies on a pan. Oh, that's funny.
You're all neat, and I'm just like,
yeah, I'm putting mine in Rose, where Rose is making a nice design out of hers. I didn't know that about us. So do you have to be concerned about how close you put these together? Are they going to spread out?
They're not going to spread as much as other things because because they don't have that leavening agent. They're not going to grow like normally, but they will probably slide a little bit because the peanut butter is going to melt. So yeah, I wouldn't put them too close together, but they're definitely not going to spread kind of like the scones will, or some sugar cookies spread a bit, some chocolate chip cookies spread a bit. And sometimes I actually flatten them out with a fork to make little crisscrosses after they come out of the oven. So
okay, after.
I do it after.
Oh,
yeah, I don't know why. I know you can also do it before, but All right.
They smell good.
Yeah.
That peanut butter smell.
Yeah, and so these are going to go in the oven at 350 for about 8 minutes. But again, I checked them a little bit earlier at like 5 or 6 minutes probably is a good window to make sure that they're not burning. So everybody's oven's a little bit different.
Right.
So
right. And when do you put the kisses on?
I put them on after they
Okay.
come out of the oven.
Okay.
So we're gonna put Hershey's Kisses on these ones to make them into little peanut butter blossoms. And I like to put those on right as they come out while they're still hot because it'll melt the bottom of the kiss a little bit and it'll adhere to the cookie. But the kiss itself won't get all melty and kind of fall
Lose its
apart.
shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these are going in this bottom of it, correct?
Correct. So this is one of my favorite recipes and one that I make probably every week.
And one I've never made.
One you've never made? Well, maybe you'll start after this. I first got it, and what made me think of showing you this recipe or sharing it with you is I first got it as a Christmas gift from one of the aides in my classrooms. And it became a favorite of mine. I like granola. Of course, I have huckleberries on it in the morning with some yogurt. But it is really easy to make, and it doesn't have all the sugar that commercially made granolas have in them. Again, it's one that you can certainly tailor to the ingredients that you like. I start out with 6 cups of old-fashioned oats. Now, I like to use that kind of as my base. But really easy to adapt if you only have 4 cups of oats in your house. You know, you don't have to go to the store and buy. There's 6. Okay? And then I've kind of adapted the recipe because I want to add some more whole grains to it. Whole grains are really good for our digestive system, and especially in preventing things like colon cancer. We want to add more roughage to our diet. So I choose to add also a cup of kamut. Now, kamut is an ancient type of wheat. They say that they found a kernel of it in King Tut's tomb.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen kamut that looks like that.
Yeah, you've probably seen the kind that we use in a salad.
Yep, the kind you have to boil to eat.
Yeah, this one has been rolled, like oats are rolled.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I also add a cup of spelt, rolled spelt. And spelt is another ancient grain, really good for you. Doesn't increase your sugar, you know, in your system too quickly.
And do you
So
get all of these? Do you get all of these in bulk too?
I do. I buy them all in bulk, wherever bulk products are sold. Yeah, and then I tend to like to add some seeds. So I'll add a half a cup of sesame seeds, half a cup of sunflower seeds. And these, by the way, are raw, so they're not salted or roasted because we're going to roast them in the oven. A half a cup of pumpkin seeds, or also known as pepitas, right? And then I tend to like coconut. I think it adds a really nice flavor. This is an unsweetened coconut, but I'm going to add about a cup and a half of that, just because it does add just that little bit of sweetness when it kind of caramelizes in the oven. And then just for protein, so that it stays with me a little bit longer, I add some nuts. These are coarsely chopped. And what I mean by coarse chop, or sometimes they're referred to as rough chop, I just put them on the cutting board and I take my chef's knife and just kind of cut them in rough chunks.
Nice.
Yeah. So nuts will add a lot more protein to this recipe. And it's about a cup of each that I use. And I used almonds and pecans in here. And again, they're not roasted or salted or candied or anything. They're just in their raw form.
Dry berries at all? Or?
You know, I brought some. I'm glad you asked. I brought some dried cranberries.
Okay.
And those you add at the end.
Okay. So you wait till after.
Yeah, you wait till after it's been in the oven. So I toss these ingredients together. And then the mixture that goes in the granola to make it a little bit sweeter, to kind of hold it together, to make it brown nicely in the oven, little caramelization, is maple syrup. And I have tried using like Log Cabin maple syrup, not the real pure maple syrup. But it tends to, I don't think, give as nice a flavor as real maple syrup. We're going to use a cup of this. So a little trivia question, Rosie. For 1 gallon of maple syrup, you know, sometimes people go to the store and they think, wow, that's pretty expensive. I don't know if I want to spend that on maple syrup, right? Because I think these are like $10.99, right around that price. To get 1 gallon of maple syrup, and this actually is a liter, so 1 gallon would be like almost 4 of these, little shy of 4 of these total. Do you know how much sap it takes from maple trees? How many gallons?
A lot, because they have to boil off a lot of that water.
Right.
I don't know how many gallons those look like.
You want to take a guess?
Trivia time.
I know.
20 gallons? Is that too much?
No, it's not actually. It's actually, for 1 gallon of syrup, it takes 40 gallons of sap. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of sap.
So that's, yeah, I mean, that's a considerable amount. A teaspoon of salt.
I think often when people are baking sweet things, they wonder if they can leave the salt out.
Sure.
And they can, yeah, you definitely can, but salt does enhance that flavor of the sweet. That's why like salted caramel or salted chocolate sometimes tastes sweeter. So sometimes you do lose a little bit of depth of flavor when you take the salt out. But if you are watching your salt intake, you can.
You certainly can. Yeah. Probably when you're baking, the only time you don't want to take the salt out is making yeast products, yeast bread products. Because it's actually, in that type of a recipe, it's actually the yeast eats the sugar, and the salt controls how fast the yeast consumes the sugar.
Okay.
And as the yeast consumes the sugar, it gives off gas, and that is what makes the bread rise. So that is one instance where you probably don't want to do that. Oh, I'm smelling your cookies.
They smell delicious.
Yeah. I should check my scones to see how they're looking. Do you?
They're pretty brown.
Oh yeah, I think they could too. You can just put them on that cooling rack. Okay, so just tossing this to coat, and you'll see that it's not a heavy coating on there whatsoever.
Take them off the tray, Cathy?
You can leave them on for just a little while. Yeah, and then we'll take them off. And then I'm just going to spread this on some cookie sheets. And this usually bakes for about 12 minutes. I stir it around just because it kind of browns where it's next to the cookie sheets. And then I put it in for about another 12 minutes. I tend to like my granola a little bit toasted. And again, that's personal preference. So
it's almost kind of back to the salts. We're just drying it back out.
right, we're drying it back out and toasting it a little bit, just like the salts, exactly. So we'll pop those in. So I can put 2 pans in here. What I'm going to want to do halfway through is put the bottom pan on top, and then the top pan on the bottom, and just rotate them like that, just because our heat is coming from the bottom, and we don't want the bottom one to get too brown.
What do we think? Take them out.
They look pretty good. just a tad bit more. Those off and we'll let those cool.
So we were just poking the cookies to see if they were tender still in the middle. They're getting a little brown around the edges, but because it's peanut butter, there's our
my alarm for the scones, so we're right on time.
But because they kind of are peanut butter, they're not gonna, they're a little hard to tell when they're done because they're all that brown color to start with. You'll find that with a chocolate cookie too. Anytime you have kind of like a chocolate batter or a brown batter, it's a little harder to tell when it's done because you won't see the same browning you would in like a yellow cake or a vanilla product. Mm-hmm. All right. So we just let the scones cool a little bit on the pan, and then we took them off and put them on a cooling rack.
And we can take the cooling rack and show you what these look like so far. I think they'd be a good breakfast treat.
Yeah, a good Christmas morning treat, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
while people are opening their stockings.
Right. We'll let those cool a little bit more before we package them up. Mm-hmm. Okay. And your cookies are almost ready, I bet.
Delicious.
Yep. How was your battery time?
Okay.
Oh, you did already?
Put another one in.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Behind you.
Do you want another?
Just gonna put it on there.
Oh, sure.
Just so we can show them how to put the kisses on. All right, so my cookies are out of the oven. Sometimes I would just push them down now with a fork to cross hatch them. Or I'd wait till they were cool and I'd dip them in chocolate. Yeah,
they smell really good.
they do smell good.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're gonna cross hatch them, I just go whoop.
And do you want to leave these on the cookie sheet just a little while to cool? Or?
Yeah, I sometimes leave them on because I pull them out a little early, and that way they keep cooking a little bit on the cookie sheet.
Right.
I also want these to stay warm while I put the kisses on there so the kisses melt a little bit. So I just push those kisses right on in the cookie.
Okay.
We have a bunch of funny different sizes. The two of
They
our
look
cookies
great.
too. Kathy's are all even, and mine are
Well, I don't think so.
usually the ones in the rows.
Maybe I got to lighten up a little bit. Maybe that's a sign.
It's the culinary arts teacher coming out here.
There you go.
Got our perfect cookie rows. Yeah.
Good.
All right, so those would be our peanut butter blossoms, and those are a really nice, easy one to add to a cookie tray that most people will really like.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you got to be aware of is allergies. So
Peanut allergies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty, our final recipe is going to be a salted caramel sauce, which is a really fun thing to make. I think a lot of people are intimidated by caramel. I'm a little intimidated by caramel because heating up sugar, I think it feels like, oh no, it's gonna burn, I'm gonna get everything all stuck together, I'm gonna spend hours doing dishes. But every time I've made a caramel sauce, it's gone pretty smooth. So you're gonna start with a cup of sugar. You're gonna put it in a saucepan. You want it to be a stainless steel saucepan or like one with like a copper bottom, right? If you're using, I don't know, like non-stick,
Right.
some of those things, like that will change it significantly. So you kind of want to be careful about the pot you choose. Then you're just gonna start heating your sugar up.
Mm-hmm. Probably at about a medium type heat.
Mm-hmm.
And what's kind of cool about this is it's just the dry sugar in there, but it's going to melt and turn to a liquid. It's going to caramelize.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different stages, so you can make lots of different types of caramel, right? You can make the little candy caramels that fall
Right.
apart. You can turn it into like a hard candy almost. Sugar does a lot of fun things when you heat it up. But I do think people are probably intimidated to even start doing that.
Right. If you cook it too long, not a problem. It'll just turn into a Rolo. And you can't put it on your ice cream or pour it, but it'll just be
Yeah.
a type of caramel that you have to suck on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So it's not a lot of ingredients in this recipe.
No, there aren't a lot of ingredients. It's a pretty easy recipe. You just start with the dry sugar on medium heat, and you want to stir it pretty consistently.
Yep.
And when we were testing this one, it looks kind of scary at some points, but it all turns out in the end.
Right.
So you kind of just gotta stick to it.
Right. And if you use, like Rosie is using a wooden spoon, so we don't have to worry about that melting in the pan. But if you choose to use a rubber scraper, you want to make sure that that's heat tempered. Or a lot of them are heat resistant up to 400 degrees, and you want to make sure that that's the case, because this is going to get pretty hot in order to melt. Likewise, you can probably turn it up a little bit too. Likewise, you want to make sure that you don't get any of that syrup stuck to your finger, because it'll burn pretty readily. Yeah.
The most dangerous things in the kitchen are things that'll stick to you when they're hot.
Right. Have you ever made like glass candy?
I haven't. I've always wanted to make that honeycomb stuff where what do you put in there that makes it go?
I don't know if I've ever made the honeycomb stuff.
Yeah, you kind of heat it up, you make a caramel, and then you put in baking soda, something like baking soda, and it reacts, and it makes this cool honeycomb.
I'm thinking this is where some editing will be, just because we'll...
It's going to take a while.
It's like watching paint dry. I'll feel a piece there. But it doesn't, once it starts turning, once it starts kind of dissolving. Do you want to,
So there's other types of caramel where you don't touch it. Like you put it on, you get it, that's the one where you start with some water in the sugar, right? And you turn it on and you just brush down the sides, but you don't actually stir it. So this is a very kind of a different type of caramel than that.
yeah, you have to be concerned sometimes with things crystallizing, and that's why you would brush down the sides with water, just to kind of wash those sugar crystals that form around the side down. Yeah. Oh, it's starting to you can
melt.
see.
Yeah, you can see some of the little. It's gonna get kind of clumpy. The sugar will start to melt and like clump together. It looks like you started to add liquid. Like the bottom of the pot looks wet because the sugar is melting. This is where you want to keep stirring so that you're not just having big clumps at the bottom.
Right. The sugar does burn pretty readily. Yeah.
Cathy's a good teacher. She taught culinary arts for a long time in Missoula. And I always think about how lucky those kids were to get to learn how to cook and all the things you learn when you start baking about science and real applications for math. And there's just so many real world applications, I think, when you start baking, not to mention you can feed yourself.
Right. The outcomes are pretty good, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can even eat your mistakes. So, yeah, now can you even see the liquid kind of at the bottom?
Yep, you can see it really kind of dissolving quick there.
So this is a recipe that you want to have all your ingredients ready and move kind of quickly on, because once this sugar will turn kind of dark, or I guess caramelized in the pan, it'll look like caramel. And once all the sugar clumps are gone, because now it's really clumping up quite a bit. Once you don't have any of those clumps left, then you're going to add your butter.
And unlike the scones where we wanted cold butter, this recipe you really need room temperature butter. So
Correct.
you want to have had your butter sitting out. This is another thing I think I did when I started baking, was try to take shortcuts. When the recipe said room temp or cold, I would sometimes not listen. And
It makes
it's
a
something you
difference,
really
doesn't
want to
it?
listen to, because a lot of recipes really hinge on whether your butter is hot or cold.
Right.
And putting cold butter in here would be a little dangerous too, right? Because it would splatter. It would.
Right. It does. It kind of starts, because this mixture is so hot, and then the butter would be cold. It does tend to splatter and kind of spit at you. Now we're getting quite a bit more liquid. This, by the way, is 5 tablespoons of butter, and so I just cut it
Up
into, I guess 6. No, it's 6 tablespoons, and I just cut it up into 6 little pieces.
I think this is one of the reasons people get scared of caramel, is because you do really kind of have to watch it. It's not like you can just put it in the oven and leave it.
Right.
You wanna be around
Yep.
and give it the attention it deserves. So we're getting close. We only have a few kind of clumps still left. We're just waiting for those to dissolve. And you can see it's turned into kind of a nice, a little darker than honey color.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Anything caramelized is delicious.
It is. isn't it?
Caramelized nuts and caramelized onions. And it's all the same process. When you caramelize onions, it's just the sugar and the onions that's breaking down
Actually,
and
yep.
caramelizing.
And caramelizing. So tell me when you don't have any
So,
crystals
I
left.
think we are looking good.
Okay.
So it looks kind of like that. All right.
So we're going to add our butter, and you'll see it
It's gonna bubble, bubble,
is
bubble.
bubbling up. Now you might want to take it off the heat at this point. Just move it over here a little bit and stir in your butter. And if the butter decides not to incorporate in there, if it looks like it's separating, you just got to keep stirring.
Right.
Yep.
And again, be careful. Don't splash yourself.
Yep.
Right?
You don't
It's
want
hot, hot and sticky.
to. Oh yeah. And definitely you don't want to put your finger in there and taste it, or lick off the wooden spoon, because it will burn. It'll stick and burn right away.
Yeah, and you saw how much bubbles there were just from the room temp butter. You really wouldn't want to put in cold butter.
Right.
And I do have a little bit of butter that didn't make its way in, that's kind of floating on the top, so I'm just going to keep
Yep, just
stirring.
keep stirring until that incorporates. Oh, that's our timer. As you're stirring, Rosie, I'm going to just stir the granola. How's that?
All right.
Okay. Okay, so you can see that it's starting to toast some, especially some of that coconut. And again, that's caramelization, you know, kind of that sugar that is happening there. I'm going to move this one up to the top rack. Move it around. And these ovens are a little bit warmer than mine at home, so I don't think it's going to take the full time,
Yeah.
actually. Okay. So I'm going to just set my timer on this for like 5 minutes. How are you doing?
Getting there.
Oh yeah. It's starting to incorporate a little bit better, isn't it? Now I turn this burner, we're going to turn this on because we do want to
Yeah.
bring it up to a boil again.
Okay.
Once that's,
Incorporated.
yeah.
It's not to love.
What's not to love
Sugar
about
and butter.
and cream?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, life is good. So again, we're using heavy whipping cream in this recipe. And once Rose gets,
It's pretty incorporated to me. It's getting there.
gets the butter incorporated in there.
And you can see it's a very like dribbly kind of caramel.
We'll probably get some spitting again because the cream is really cold. We don't want to
Yep.
keep that at room temperature.
Okay, just move it back to
Okay.
the heat to put the cream in, or
Yep.
put it in.
You can move it back to the heat. See how steady my hand is. And I'm going to drizzle this in, and you're going to stir. This is kind of like a two-person.
And again, it's going to take a little while to come together. So right now it kind of looks like a soupy mess.
You could take it off the heat now, too. Because it looks like it's turning a little bit
too
darker.
dark. I know. I was like, uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to just top it off with a little bit of salt. So for that salted caramel taste.
Burners are hot.
They are very hot, aren't
A lot
they?
of heat.
Yeah. One thing you want to make sure whenever you're making a candy is you never want to double the recipe. The proportions are so specific that if you half or double, a lot of times candy doesn't turn out.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And sometimes recipes also with candy call for a candy thermometer so you can test the temperature of the candy. It looks like it's starting to incorporate a little better. If you do not have a candy thermometer, then what you can always use is a little cup of water. And there's just cold water in here. And what I do is I just drop a little bit of syrup in there. And then I pull the syrup out and feel it. And because this is cold, that hardens the syrup to the temperature it's going to be when it is at room temperature or hardens up.
Yeah. Is that why you hear all those phrases like soft ball and hard ball? Is that what it turns into when you drop it in the water?
Right. Yeah. So it's just another method of maybe double checking your thermometer to make sure that that's reading correctly, or if you don't have a thermometer, using that water test.
And this is something that you can store in the refrigerator. You just need to heat it back up. It'll get pretty kind of solidy.
Right.
Won't flow as well, and so you just pop it in the microwave if you're going to put it on ice cream, or you're going to dip some apple slices in it, or you're going to... What else would we do with caramel?
Oh, you could drizzle it on a cheesecake, either on the plate or on top of the cheesecake.
Yeah.
You can eat it.
With a spoonful.
Why not?
On Friday
I say.
afternoon.
Yeah, I think it's caramel time.
This is a good way to get your Fitbit steps.
Yeah,
If you wear your Fitbit on your right wrist,
that's right.
you can get your
Oh, will that
stirring.
clock
I don't
here?
know. We'll see.
You
Yeah,
got
it
a
looks
lot of
like I've gotten
exercise?
12 minutes of exercise.
Well, that means you can eat more caramel. I love it. Maybe you just need to make a pan of caramel every day.
Whip some cream. Should I be
That's looking pretty
concerned
good.
that it's got some little streakies in it?
No,
No. Okay.
no.
Still gonna taste delicious.
Let's see if I can get this to turn off. Oh my goodness. Maybe that did it. All these new phones. Okay. Looks like that's done. Aw. That happened. Here. How's it looking? I think it's looking pretty good. We just have a few little. It sure is a nice golden color, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Smells good too. Yeah.
So we have, our granola. And at this point, I would let it cool and then add any kind of dried fruit
Nice.
that I want. Yeah.
So raisins or cranberries.
Raisins, cranberries, apricots, little dried apples.
Ooh, you could probably even do some like pineapple or for a fun twist.
Yep. And it keeps really well. If you wanted to make this for like a Christmas gift, you could make it and it would keep for 2-3 months really.
Wow.
There's nothing in there that's going to spoil. Yeah. Same with the scones, they freeze really well. So
I think this you can refrigerate it up to like 3 weeks, I think.
yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it says you could freeze it in an airtight container for up to 3 months.
Okay. I don't know if caramel sauce would keep that long in my house.
Yeah. I've never had the need to freeze caramel sauce, but I suppose you could do it if you needed to.
If you needed to.
Alrighty.
Alrighty, should I add the salt?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just going to add just a little bit of salty flavor. Like Rose said, to offset that sweetness of the caramel.
Yeah, and it almost makes it kind of taste rich. It's a richer flavor.
Right.
But if you don't like salted caramel, you could for sure leave the salt out.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think salted caramel has become kind of a little bit of a trend. And if you wanted to be able to detect the salt in there a little more, you could use the kosher salt. That would add, a little bit of that crunch too.
Yeah.
And because this does stiffen up, once or get a lot thicker, once you're ready to package it, you want to put it in your jar right away while it's still in that liquid kind of state.
All right.
Rubber spray. Now that looks heavenly.
It's making me want an ice cream sundae right now. You can tell I'm hungry. It's all this cooking with a mask on.
Keeps you from
Keeps me
snacking,
from
doesn't it?
snacking.
Yeah. That's right. The other day, with my caramel sauce, I served it with some brownies and just took the brownie and drizzled it. But you could also, before you bake the brownies, possibly put
Drizzle
some
in there.
globs of caramel on it and then swirl it in the brownie and then bake it. And I bet that would be good too.
I bet that would be delicious.
Now that pan might look a little bit intimidating as far as cleaning it up, but the best, because you can see, this is going to harden, it's going to be a little bit stuck possibly, but the best way to clean that is just really hot water. So if you could
you'll dissolve it.
boil some up in your teapot and
Pour it in there.
pour it in there, then
Or
that'll
you
make
could
it easy to
right
clean up.
now cut up an apple.
And just, clean it up that way. Good job. Looks lovely.
Got some salted caramel here. All right, so thanks for tuning in to watch our 3 episodes on how to make holiday gifts. We hope whatever holiday you're celebrating and however it looks this year, that you have a wonderful time with your family and your friends. And, you know, we can all use a little pick-me-up this year. So I think delivering some of these to our neighbors, finding a tiny moment to do some baking in your own home, hopefully that lifts your spirits this holiday season. And we hope you come out and check out the library when it's done. This is a lovely little area where we've got cookbooks and a demo kitchen, and it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to cook alone. Since Rosie and I couldn't social distance, we used masks. And so you can still cook, you know, with family and friends. Just take those precautions that you need to this season.
Yeah. All right.
So thank you very much. We have our peanut blossoms, our caramel sauce, our granola, and our scones. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Thanks for cooking with me.
Yes, thanks for cooking with me.